All right, let's start our conversation. First of all, I just want to say hello to everyone. Welcome all of our viewers and listeners. What you're seeing here is the video of the conversation I'm going to have with Kristine Berg and Arne Berggren. And then if you prefer listening to watching, you can just listen to it on YouTube, or you can wait a week or so, and this will be up on my podcast. So first of all, let me just explain how I came to know these two characters, who are actually not characters in a movie or a television series, but they're certainly characters in terms of what they write and direct and produce. I guess it was this past summer when being a fan of Nordic Noir, I was very happy to see Outlier, that is, find out about it. And I thought it was really a much better than usual example of a Nordic Noir series. And that's high praise, because being a fan of Nordic Noir, I think just about everything I see, whether it's Border Town or Outlier, is very much worth seeing. And then more recently, I got to see Catch and Release, which is a completely different story. And actually, let's start talking about that first, because one of the things that really struck me about Catch and Release, and one of the reasons why that struck me, is in my first novel, I had a semi-major character. My first novel was The Silk Code, who was a woman in her late 70s or 80s. And everyone was saying to me, wow, I can't believe you wrote about an old woman. You know, you expect to see some woman in her 20s or 30s or 40s. So I was immediately struck in just the first episode, and of course she turned out to be a major character, a retired policewoman who was dying of cancer. And that is one of the most unusual central characters I've seen, not only in any Nordic noir story, but in any police detective story at all. So what gave you the impetus and motivation to do that?
That's a very good question. Do you remember?
I don't actually remember exactly what brought up the idea, but I think we were both of us were a bit tired of this classical Nordic noir main character being a sporty 30 years something, a bit dysfunctional girl with not a big social life. So we were wondering and pondering, okay, how can we twist this character a bit?
Yeah, and it's an important bit of this is we have total freedom, because we are financing more or less the series by not going to a traditional channel or streaming network. So we can do whatever we want. And we knew the actor Anita Sukkari. She's a Finnish-Norwegian actor. We worked with her on a theater piece earlier on, and we are big fans. And we asked her if could she do a small part, and then it grew.
Yeah. It actually grew, because we saw that, okay, this is getting interesting. So we shot 2 episodes at first and cut them and edited them and just thought, okay, wow, we have to write this as a big major character.
And it has something to do with the other main character, Filippa, the police officer, because she was originally just an extra with some lines on the murder scene, and we got curious. Can she do more? She's interesting. She's stealing the scene, and then we had this pair of women, the young, innocent, unexperienced, and the old, almost dying. It was an interesting duo.
So, you know, I can see why I like your work, because I write the same way that you write and do movies. People often ask me, well, did you work all this out? Did you know what was going to happen? And the answer is no. I might have some vague idea, but I usually don't know what's even going to happen in the next chapter. And that makes it much more fun. So without giving away the very ending, in case someone is watching or listening to this and they haven't seen the whole series, is it correct then that you did not plan to have the ending the way it came down? Because that was really shocking.
Yes, it's much like writing a novel it's lots of improvising, I think.
Yeah, we tend to have a storyline, and we of course try to have some scripts ready for when we start shooting, but we are always too late with the scripts, and we also like the freedom to adjust as we see the work in progress. So we have a lot of freedom to rewrite and discuss with the actors and with the photographer, and then actually rewrite as we record almost.
So that's another similarity we have, because lateness is my middle name. You know, as my students know, I don't like coming to anything early. It seems like a waste of time. And one of my greatest pleasures as a teacher is like dashing into the classroom like a second before it's supposed to begin. But let me ask you about something else that you just said, which I also find interesting. You basically finance these productions yourself. That, I think, is an enormous advantage. One of the things as a media theorist that I've been exploring for years is the damage that we call them gatekeepers in media theory. You know, they are the ones who decide, will this book get published or not? Will this movie get made? Will this television series get made? And it's, you know, the public tends to think, well, okay, I guess they decide whether or not something should get made or not, or published. But as we know, they decide much more than that. Even when they decide to go ahead with something, they usually stick their 2 cents in, and it's far more than 2 cents. They can have major changes. You know, my late editor at one of my publishers, Tor Books, was a great guy, David Hartwell. And this gets back again to my first novel. He had a suggestion which I didn't agree with for my first novel. And then I had to go through the aggravation. I decided, okay, I'll put it in. It's not that bad. I'll do it his way. And then I had to read like several critics saying the one thing they didn't like about the novel was his suggestion. So what am I going to do? Say, hey, don't blame me, you know, blame my editor. But in your case, was this a result of, I mean, I guess it could be several things. Was it A, you wanted to have final say? B, you tried to get things made by, let's say, even both of these things, Outlier and Catch and Release, by some, you know, bigger company, and they didn't accept it? Or maybe C, you know, you're both fabulously wealthy and you're able to finance your own work.
None of the above. We just want the freedom, and we did a soap in Norway, 400 episodes of soap, daily soap, and we tried to experiment with low-cost production. We tried everything, and we learned a lot about taking creative control and do cost-efficient productions. And then it gave us the opportunity to take control and finance it. So it's quite interesting to let the writers, the creators, be on set and in the middle of everything. And we don't have to call a producer who has to call a writer who has to call his mother or something to get yes or no for some changes. We just do them, and that saves us lots of money day by day.
And we have a very interesting collaboration with a Danish company called Reinvent. They are distributors And they are co-financing and co-producing our shows. So they do a lot of the financing, of course, but they are and they are somehow gatekeepers, of course, but they are super experienced, and they have given us a lot of trust. And they work actually quite different from other TV channels or TV distributors. So they have given us the possibility to be quite to have a big freedom when we are out creating. So that's a blessing, actually, to be able to work with the Reinvent.
Absolutely. So, the only difference between you and Charlie Chaplin, who also wrote, directed, and produced all of his own movies, is he also starred in them. So are either or both of you thinking of doing that at some point?
I think she should do that.
Yeah. No,
No,
yeah.
that's taking it too far, I think.
Well, you never
know.
know. Yeah. I mean, again, the equivalent, as far as being an author, is, obviously there are audio books, and, for some of my books, I've done my own, readings, and in some ways it's more fun to have somebody else read your words. But also, unless you're really very much on the same page with them, sometimes, no matter how hard you work with them, they just can't quite get what you were hearing in your mind when you wrote it. And so eventually you have to accept it, which probably is the main impetus for people starring in their own movies and doing their own audiobooks. Let's talk a little bit about Outlier. Which also appealed to me because, there's a whole, I don't know if you would call it a genre, maybe a subgenre, meaning not that it's below, but it's a smaller, piece than just a genre of academic fiction, and meaning the fiction is not academic in a rarefied sense that no one is going to understand it, but it features something that happens in academia. It features a university as a setting. Isaac Asimov and I as well, because I greatly admire Asimov, have written some things where science fiction stories take place. The whole Foundation series that Isaac Asimov did, a major part is the library in Trantor, and how that plays a role in the story. So what motivated the two of you in Outlier to focus on a character who certainly was not an old woman? She is a more conventional, beautiful young woman character who is, if I recall, she is working on her PhD in London, and then gets called back to Norway to investigate something which has to do with her personal life as well. But what gave you the motive to start that and place that in the academic context, at least to start?
I think, I don't remember exactly, but when we did some research on serial killers and the theory behind catching a serial killer, then we got fascinated by these guys writing these books and having it as a sort of their expertise.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of person has an expertise in serial killers? How are they working? What is making them tick and go? It was just fascinating to think of that kind of character.
And could it be some experience in as a child that raised the interest for serial killers? Could it be something she experienced herself? And if she was from a remote town, from the outskirts of maybe Oslo or in Norway, maybe the other person, probably a guy who did something to her, also developed into a serial killer. That could be an interesting coincidence. Then she would have this as a traumatic past. And if she read about something, because serial killers, they start with the small crimes, and they are mean to cats and dogs or something, and it evolves over time. Maybe she could read about something, and that started the memory going from her past.
Yeah, serial killers are definitely fascinating to make movies and television series about, and that's pretty much all
Done before.
That's right. Not to know in person. You know, one of the probably most infamous but most fascinating serial killers is Dexter, who did start out, you know, killing animals. I don't know if you've seen, by the way, the Dexter New Blood. It's okay. I highly recommend it. And because what happened there is, I think it was about 8 seasons, and the ending dissatisfied fans. And what I can tell you without giving anything away is the ending of this new season that has dissatisfied a lot of fans as well. So, you know, we'll see what happens. But that's because, I mean, obviously in that story, unlike just about every other serial killer, he's almost a serial killer on the side of the angels, because the people he kills are themselves horrible people and often serial killers. And that's how he gets his instincts out. Why, to get back to Outlier, though, did you make the husband of the main character? He was a pretty dislikable character. So what was that based on? You just thought it would work well in the story?
The husband of the main character?
Yes, the guy who she's studying. They're married, right? Or she?
Yeah, yeah, the English
Right.
guy, right?
Yeah.
How did we come up with this English guy?
We knew him as an actor and liked liked him as a person, and it's more like it could be fun, something talking British in the series, to be totally honest with you. But we paired them and did some shoots with them, and they matched. And he was this more or less annoying, talking to her from above. It made her more weak in a very interesting way. It pushed her. He was a very annoying British gentleman, and always knows better than her. And of course, he was just an kind of antagonist on her story arc. It was not a very big idea. It was just let's get in Benjamin because he's a brilliant actor, and we like talking to him because he's
So it was a coincidence.
No, go ahead. No, I like that. I mean, that's fascinating. Probably most of our listeners and viewers don't know that especially in a case where you're making your own television series or movie, you might put in a character just because you like an actor who's available to play that character. You know, the public tends to think it goes the other way. You come up with the idea for a character and you think, well, who can play this character? And then you decide. You might pick someone you know. But it's interesting. It's like putting the cart before the horse, or, you know,
Also, we had this idea of British Library and London and big buses, red buses, and all the telephone booths and everything. But we did the shoot actually in the small town in the Arctic. We found a kitchen that it could be somewhere in London. So it's just around the corner from the studio. So people believe it's London.
I like that. I mean, look, it could certainly be pretty chilly in London. They don't have the greatest heating in the world, even in their hotels. But and I will say this, based on my own experience in the academic world, most of the professors that I know, and I won't mention any names, are irritating characters. You know, they're arrogant. They think they're more intelligent than anybody else in the room. They're so used to dealing with students that it doesn't matter who else they're talking to. It could be a member of their family. It could be, you know, just a person that has nothing to do with the academic world. They treat them as students. So in that sense, you caught that very well, that academic flavor. Since science fiction is actually more of a primary interest even than my interest in Nordic Noir and my interest in detective fiction, which is a pretty close second. But I'm always interested when I talk to filmmakers and people who do television series, do they have any projects or inclinations that they might like to talk about, which could be science fiction or fantasy?
We have
Mm,
had some, and it has to do with the brain and how could a crime plot have something to do with the mind and the almost the inside universe and what's going on in people's mind. So we've been there, but not as a science fiction thing, but in a quite different universe.
but we have done some fantasy. We had The Dead Ones.
Yeah.
The Dead Ones was a television show for kids about ghosts. That's maybe the closest we have been to science fiction, I think.
Yeah. We have to disappoint you.
No, that's okay. That's okay. By the way, here in the United States, there's a pretty, not an unbreachable distance, but a pretty big distance between science fiction and fantasy. And actually, some science fiction people, and I'm not among them, actually disparage fantasy. There's a science fiction writer by the name of Gregory Benford, who himself is a physicist. So I guess it's understandable. He refers to fantasy as playing with the net down. In other words, you're playing tennis with the net down because he thinks it's easier to write fantasy, which I don't think it's fair to say. I mean, Harry Potter, all of those books couldn't have been easy to write, and or Lord of the Rings, and there are great fantasy stories. By the way, as far as probing what's going on in the human brain, one of the best of Philip K. Dick's both stories and the movie, I think, I guess Steven Spielberg was the one who made it at least about maybe 15, 20 years ago, would be Minority Report, where you have these empaths who can, predict just by getting into the mind of a potential killer when, if and when, and even where they're going to kill somebody. So that is a rich area. So you should do it. Let's talk about another aspect which interests me, just because just in terms of my own, what I always like to talk about is what I also do, professionally or otherwise. So music is another thing. I have a few albums out, and I'm therefore always especially interested, and I pay attention to the music in what I'm watching on the screen, because I'm sure you'll agree that makes a big difference. It sets the scene, it conveys an emotion, it conveys part of the story that both goes beyond words and puts the words in a context. So perhaps you can talk a little bit about how you did that in both of those series, Catch and Release and Outlier.
We have a composer called Raymond Enochson. He's yes, the ADHD type. He's full of power, energy. He's working all the time. So he's working pretty close with us in the process. He's a fantastic guy. And we are going back and forth with the scenes, and we have some ideas of what it could be, and he will do something totally different, of course, and that's the process. But we did something. We added a layer in Catch and Release with some. With a guy called Sondre Bratland. That's a hymn, or yeah, it's very
a traditional religious hymn.
Yeah, it's very dark, and I think if we hadn't the creative freedom, we could never start with this old woman having cancer and end the first episode with Sondre Bratland because it's too dark and it's too religious for a mainstream audience. I don't know if you did you have some reactions to the music at the end of episode 1? How did you
I thought the music was excellent. It was very effective. It was very moving, and it brought home what was going on in the story perfectly. And I mean, what music can be done in all kinds of ways. I don't know if you've seen any of Station 11, which is a post-apocalyptic series here in the United States. It's on HBO Max, and it's about COVID seems to be bad, which obviously it is. In this story, there's a flu that kills 99% of the population. So I mean that's really bad. But and this series jumps around what's happening now, where the world would be, where some of the major characters would be 20 years from now. And what they did there is they not only had like music in the background, but they actually created songs, new songs that the characters or some heard or sang in the actual story. So I thought that was a very innovative and excellent way of doing it. By the way, I should mention, as long as we're talking about post-apocalyptic things, as some people know, but I don't mind mentioning this to the millions of people who will be watching and listening to this interview, that one post-apocalyptic movie that I thought was atrocious, but a lot of people like it, is Don't Look Up. This is this movie. It's like the #1 movie on Netflix. So I don't know if you saw it. I won't spoil the ending, but I will say, it was dealing with a serious topic, but I think it dealt with it in such an idiotic and totally pessimistic way that it basically ruined the story. So
I haven't seen it yet, but
but we have heard all the discussions about it, and you either hate it or you love it. So right. I think we have to see to make up an opinion about it.
Yeah, well, I won't hold it against you if you wind up loving it. Okay, so I usually like to end these things around a half an hour or a little longer, and I think we do have a few more minutes. Would you feel comfortable talking about, without maybe naming them, or if you want, you can name them, some new projects, what you're currently working on, what you hope to be doing in the next couple of years?
Yeah, sure. We have some upcoming crimes and thriller series. They are mainly Norwegian. One of the project is Norwegian, Danish, English. So we have a lot of crime and thrillers, but we are also developing more classical drama, relations, character drama in different genres.
We're trying to be a creative hub for showrunners and writers, and trying to trigger co-productions all over Norway. And the big challenge for the Norwegian business is all the productions are going on in Oslo, in the main city. So we're trying to scale up the business with doing more co-productions and giving students and young talents the opportunity to get into the business and co-produce and co-write. So that's why we are planning to have more or less 3, maybe 4 productions going on in the next year.
Yeah.
And it's all too much. It's too much. It's not doable, but we're trying to do it to force us to delegate and involve young talents. So that's an experiment going on with Reinvent in Denmark and with the Film Camp. It's the studio we are using up in the Arctic. We are sitting in Oslo, down south in Norway as we speak. But every time we produce, we go up to the Arctic. That's about 100,000 100,000 kilometers.
100,000, 300 kilometers from here.
Yeah, to the North Pole. So we're trying to do things directly in the other way than the rest of the business. But the first one is a thriller. It's about identity theft.
Yeah.
It's about the security, cybersecurity. Not being a sci-fi, or sorry to say, but that's a new environment. It's not the usual murder case. So we're always try to do something new that we haven't done before.
Well, good. By the way, if it's any consolation, a high-tech thriller is just on the edge of science fiction. And we in science fiction recognize it as like a very close and friendly neighbor. We deal with the same thing. By the way, I'll also say, good for you for taking on way too much work. I think that's the way to do it. And, this might sound like unfriendly to some people, but this advice, oh, you're working too hard, relax, you need to take a vacation. That's not the way to go. That's not a recipe for success. I think I read somewhere that Anatole France, he was like this great writer in the 19th century. He like dropped dead over his typewriter or whatever he was using back then. He was like in his 80s or 70s. So, I mean, whatever I hear about that, good for him. I mean, what's better than that? Being in some, quiet place where you're not doing anything of any importance. So, I'm a great believer in taking on more than you think you can do, because one of the other things, obviously, as you know, about creativity is the more you take on, the more stimulated the creative part of your brain is, and therefore you can wind up doing more and more.
Yeah, and work with different teams that cross-pollinate. I don't know if that's the word. Pollinate. We can influence back and forth, like we take on this composer Raymond Enochsen and bringing him into the room, does something to the story and so on. So have several productions going on at the same time may do something to all of them.
And trying to do something that seems impossible right now is forcing sort of the brain and the creativity to just come up with a new solution. So we have to sort of reinvent the way we produce and the way we write and the way we direct to make this come through, I think.
Yeah. What are the limits for creativity? How many storylines can we deal with at once, at the same time? We don't know, but the brain is a fantastic device. Yes. So we are very much into experiment with creativity and the process. That's the big part of everything we love with making TV series.
Good. There's a book, I can't remember the name of it. It's by a doctor who's on CNN. His name is Sanjay Gupta. And it basically is a book about what happens to the brain when it ages. And he has advice about what to do this and that. And I thought it was a pretty good book, except for one thing. He says, as a doctor, when you get older, you should try not to multitask. Don't do too many things at the same time. So when I read that, I realized that if that's truly the case, it's hopeless for me, because I'm always doing 100 things at the same time. But I do think, as you are saying, that there is a cross-pollination and a stimulation. So listen, before I forget, and I don't mind our listeners and viewers knowing this, there's an automatic closed caption that's generated on YouTube, so people can read what's going on. And then in addition to that, I have like through Fordham University, I have like a special captioning service. They're not the greatest either in general, neither one, but so I carefully go through it. But the reason why I'm mentioning this, if you could just send me in Twitter or whatever, a list of some of the names of the people that you mentioned. I mean, I know who the actors are in the various movies, but like, some of the other people that you mentioned, so we can at least give them the decency of spelling their names correctly. There's the old W.C. Fields joke, I don't care what you say about me as long as you spell my name correctly. So, I think that's a very, very good point. So, All right. Well, listen, thanks very much. You can certainly count on me to eagerly watch and review your upcoming work whenever it comes out. And again, for anyone who's listening, you know, I got to know Arne, I guess, on Twitter because I posted a review of Outlier, and Arne said thank you, and we followed each other. Twitter is a great way for anyone who's making movies and television shows to get out there, to be in touch with people who are reviewing it. You know, there's a lot of negativity about social media because they do a lot of dangerous things and bad things, like spreading misinformation about COVID, et cetera, but we won't get off on that or any politics here. But they also do very good things like bringing people together. So, you know, I'm really grateful for that. So thank you very much. And maybe I'll interview you again in a couple of years and talk about some of your new projects.
Thank you for having us.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye.